We changed the game for cost-effective all-flash storage when we introduced the AFFC series. We broke the mold again with the incredible performance and guaranteed 6 nines of availability in the SAN-optimized ASA A series. And now, we're shattering even the greatest expectations to give you the best of both worlds. Introducing the new ASA C series, NetApp's first capacity flash for block-optimized storage with unmatched savings and sustainability. The ASA C series is more resilient, flexible, and cost-effective for managing your capacity-intensive block workloads, including VMware and databases. Achieve continuous data access and a consistent hybrid cloud experience with massive scalability, all while lowering power consumption by up to 70% when compared to competitive all-flash arrays. And have we mentioned our ransomware recovery guarantee? Modernize without compromise and flash forward to the intelligent data infrastructure you've been dreaming of.
Hello, everyone, and welcome back to NetApp On Air. It has been a minute. I have missed you guys. I'm glad to be back with you here, coming across LinkedIn, YouTube, Twitch, and right here in our home of Discord. We're excited to be back with you guys. We've got a wonderful slate of shows coming up in the next few weeks, leading up to the end of the year, into the holidays. We have got a lot of stuff to talk about because we just had our annual Insight event, and there were tons of sessions, tons of great presenters, tons of great announcements, and we have a lot to cover in the coming weeks. As I mentioned, Insight was this past week. If you were there and you got to say hi, I'm so excited. Thank you so much for stopping by and saying hi to us in the community lounge. We hope you will follow us and join us in Discord and continue that conversation for the other 362 days of the year while we wait for the next Insight to come around. So come over there and join us. There's lively conversations going on across all different spectrums. From sustainability and AI all the way across ONTAP and our entire product portfolio. ONTAP, that's a good one. That's a good reason to talk about things today because we have a lot to go over. There was a new version of ONTAP announced. As you may have seen in the title of this video, there is a new version of ONTAP out, and we have brought back a returning special guest to talk about all of that stuff today. So I'm going to waste no more time, bring him on up to the stage because we got a few things to talk about. Mr. Keith Aasen, how are you doing, sir?
I'm hanging in there, Nick. How about you?
I think we are going to joke about this for the entirety of this show, but you and I both brought home more than some pins and buttons from Insight this year. We brought home a little bit of...
Vegas stays in Vegas, but apparently it doesn't apply for everything.
Right. So we've both been kind of on the reason... One of the reasons we didn't have a show last week is because both of us have been down and out, and we've been kind of on the mend for the last week or so. A lot's happened in the last 2 weeks. We had Halloween. I dressed up as a crazy pirate. What was the other thing that I was thinking about? I went and did a strategy session immediately after Insight. I got to go to Game 3 of the World Series to see my Rangers play in Phoenix. And then they won the whole thing in Game 5. And so it has been an insane couple of weeks. And then to pile on top of it, I got sick. So...
I've just been sick. I came home, felt good for 24 hours, and then I kind of went downhill. And it's been kind of a rough road since then. So anybody's heard me present before, not my normal voice here. If you're only listening to the audio version, you're like, who is that? Anyway, it is me. I just bit of a different voice today. That's all.
Yeah. Well, we have a big show today, guys, because we are going to be talking about ONTAP. Keith, give me a little bit of a recap. You had one of the most attended sessions at Insight this year. That had to be an amazing interactive experience to be able to do that. But the thing that I really wanted to ask you about was, like, we just had you on in January of this year talking about 9.12 and giving us this very same story about everything that came out in 9.12. We're now we're 10 months removed from that, and we're already talking about 9.14. What has changed? How have we gotten to the point where we're on this cadence now to where we're just releasing things more and more often? And if you can, give me a recap of like what took place in 12.13 that led to some of the improvements that we're going to talk about today.
For sure, it's relentless. You go right getting one out the door and immediately into the next, and there's multiple versions of ONTAP being developed simultaneously. So it's always a lot to keep track of. But yeah, like you said, the pace is relentless. Those that maybe know, there's actually 4 releases a year, right? We do 2 cloud specific releases and 2 on-prem releases. And so that's 1 release every 3 months. It's wild. There's a lot to keep up with. But yeah, 13's out, available. It's actually on P4 already right now.
Wow.
Ramping up really, really quick. Yeah, some big things in there too, right? Our autonomous ransomware protection, which, man, I should have brought a diagram. Autonomous ransomware protection has had this wild curve of adoption. Well past the 10,000 system mark now. And one of the things we added in 9.13 was support for flex groups. So now even looking across these huge data sets that span multiple controllers in a cluster, we can still watch and detect an alert based on a ransomware attack occurring somewhere in that flex group. So pretty powerful. Lots of little things in 13 as well, but it's usually our fall releases on-prem are the ones that have the big payload, right? When we talked about 12 and now being back here for 14, it seems like the even number ones are our big payload releases.
So we did announce 9.12 a year ago at Insight, but we didn't ship it until January of this year. Is that the same case? Are users able to get at 9.14 now, or are we waiting for a later ship date?
We thought you would. So it's very close. So we announced it. The release candidate should be available for download by the end of the week here. We're looking for this, November 10th would be kind of a good day to check the website for. And that's a release candidate. So, what the heck is a release candidate? Well, it's one that's passed all of our QA tests. But before we deem something GA, we really want to see ONTAP deployed in a number of environments, right? It has to be deployed on a number of systems, have to have so many hours of operating time, a number of different customers, and then hit a reliability point. And we do all of that prior to moving something to GA. So when that actually occurs is always a bit fuzzy, because it depends on how many people pull the RC down for testing. But yeah, it's usually towards the end of the year or into January is when we should see that flip over to a GA release.
Nice. So January timeframe, you think would be the okay. So,
but as of Friday, you should be able to pull down the release candidate if you have a testing box or a lab. Get testing with it for sure.
Yeah, make sure you get those auto supports on so we can get that data back from you guys, so that these can happen really fast. Hint, hint, wink, wink.
Yep.
All right, so let's dive into it. The last thing I'll say is we talked about the release cadence. Is there, to lead us into 9.14, having been on this journey kind of with you throughout this year, what are the things that we talked about in 9.12 and 9.13 that may have had implications on things that were improvements that we're going to see in 9.14? Anything retrospectively that you want to say about 9.12 and 9.13?
When we go through the features, you'll see a couple of them. One big one is consistency groups. Consistency groups are one of those things that we keep adding incremental change in every release. And it wasn't really to 9.14. I kind of look back, wow, actually, this is really different from what we first released. It's really powerful now. And unfortunately, sometimes we can go, we add just a little bit here and a little bit there. But when you look back a few versions from what it was just a couple years ago, it's now a really powerful feature. So we'll dive a bit more into that, but specifically the 12 release and the 13 release adds some functionality, and we really sort of polished it off in 9.14 with consistency groups.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, so I know we got a lot to cover today. It's a big payload delivery, guys. I'm going to get out of the way. Let's put some slides up on the screen and walk through it, and I'll jump in with some color commentary as you go through it. If you guys attended Insight and maybe this session, some of this you may have seen before, but we're doing this in a way to make sure that this gets out to the masses, not just those that attended Insight in person, so that you can see this here. You can see many other sessions as well, just as a quick side note, over on NetApp TV, and those will be coming here to the NetApp YouTube channel very soon as well. So stay tuned for that. But Keith, take it away.
Yeah, I only got to do this session once at Insight. It was standing room only, which was awesome. There's tons of great questions. But I did a condensed version 4 times. But the deep dive only once. So there's a few features in here that if you're able to get the condensed version, there'll be a few features in here you probably haven't seen before. But, have the questions come in as we go, and we'll address them.
Definitely will.
So when I say it was a heavy payload, it actually makes it a tricky release to talk about, right? There was actually 88 feature enhancements in here. And so there's no way we're going through all 88 of them. And some of them are sort of behind the scenes things as well. But if you want to kind of say where we spent our time, it was really in these three big areas, like data protection. You just can't, you can't ever relent in data protection, just having new ways of protecting your data as how you architect environments changes. And we did a really big enhancement in data protection around application high availability. I'll save that one for the end because it's a tech preview, but we have a new capability referred to as SnapMirror Active Sync. And we'll talk about what that is at the end.
Okay.
Security, man, we've all had to become security experts. A funny thing I did a show was I asked, who in the room is a security expert, and nobody ever raised their hand. And my theory is if you're a security expert, part of being a security expert is you can't reveal that you're a security expert. But I think to some degree we all have to be very aware of being of data security, and so we have to kind of ramp up on that. So we'll share some enhancements there. And finally, cost optimization. Like, I love that we share with the big announcement was announcing the ASAC series. That platform is a hardware way of doing a massive cost reduction of storing data. But there's a number of ways we can do that in software as well. And 9.14 has a ton of that as well. So a couple big ones, obviously doing an improvement to raw to usable ratio, and then as well as fabric pool. Fabric pool is something we haven't shown a lot of love in the last few releases. So it got lots of love in 9.14 is a big way of reducing cost of storing data.
Nice.
So let's talk about data protection. Tell me, Nick, how many times do you think, when you were demoing NetApp stuff in the early days, or maybe even when you were, I know you were a sysadmin before you joined NetApp, did you do the classic DR test, which was, I have a replication going, I want to test to make sure that I can recover that data. You want to build a flex clone, you want to mount that flex clone or share that out, run your test, and then tear it all back down. Like, how many times do you think you did that?
It's a hard question to answer because before I did that stuff as a full-time admin, data center engineer, I was a contractor who got paid to write run books.
Right.
So disaster recovery and, BCDR is kind of one of my little feathers in my hat that I spent a lot of focused time on early in my career. And a lot of it was companies didn't know how to do that and do proper testing, and, field audits and test recoveries and things like that. And I would write operational run books for them, literally print them out and put them in 3-ring, pull cord in case of emergency kind of binders. Yeah. I used to call them the so-and-so gets hit by a bus edition, right? Like, what do you do if the guy that knows everything gets hit by a bus?
Yeah.
Like, how do you run that's how, so I would document all of that stuff for the company, and I would spend anywhere from a month to 3 months to sometimes 6 months with them documenting every process that they did. So we would do testing as part of those to show that as a kind of a success criteria of me completing the work. So that was where I spent a lot of time doing that. For me, doing it at a company, one, we were a healthcare company. We dealt with PII. We had to deal with that kind of stuff, which means we had mandates that we had to keep patient records around for at least 7 years. We kept them for longer than that. I think it was 15 years that we had records back to. And then when we went public in 2000, first of all, it's a healthcare company. Then we took it public. So then all of the SOX and HIPAA auditors start getting involved. So you have new sets of requirements that come into play. So yeah, we were testing, I would safely say once a year, a full smoking hole DR kind of scenario. But there were quarterly audits of simple file and application recovery, VM recoveries and things like that, that were smaller scale, that we would do on a quarterly basis. Yeah, it's you have to do it. It's not an option. Like the fact that people think it's a choice is insanity to me.
Well,
and I just don't understand how we
right?
live in 2023 where that's even an option anymore.
Yeah, you have to test it. I never had an experience to do any of that, but as a VMware admin, before I joined NetApp, I would quite often get ad hoc testing. And I mean by that, which was, I have a VM or an application acting funny. Can you give me a copy of that VM from last night, 2 days ago? I want to see if, like, I made a change. I'm not sure if that change caused this or not. Can I see the VM before I made that change? You get these ad hoc. I don't really want to restore the VM, but I want to find out what that was like prior at an earlier date.
Yeah.
And again, to your point of writing all that down, man, the simpler you can make, the better.
Yeah.
So rather than doing things, previously we could do all this before, but you had to do it by CLI. So now in 9.14, kind of the first, really nice little nugget we have is to do volume level DR rehearsal. So I can grab a volume that's being replicated. I can right click on it and say test DR, and it will ask me, okay, great. Here's a mount point. And so it automatically builds a flex clone for you. It suggests a mount point. You can edit it, but it suggests one for you, and you can say go. And it presents that out on the DR site. And then you can share that mount point with the app owner or data owner to do their testing. And then the best part, which hopefully you always documented, which is when they're done, how to clean this all up.
Yeah.
It used to have to be like, oh, I can't destroy the flex clone while the mount's still there, so I got to offline the mount, all that sort of order of operations. This is just when it's done, you do a click to say clean up, and it automatically tears down the mount point, destroys the flex clone, and you're back to gold, right? So just really,
and the fact that all of this can be programmatic and automated is another big thing. Like so guys, in 2010, like we were doing this through a ticketing system. I was using PowerShell at the time, but now it's all API driven, and you can programmatically do this with code and your own internal provisioning systems and set TTLs on things. You can do all of that stuff. So yeah, back then, like we would, if anybody wanted a scenario like you just described where they wanted to see a VM from 2 nights ago, sure, I can do that. Open a ticket and tell me how long you need it for, because when that TTL expires, it's all going to get torn down. And know that none of the stuff that you do in there is going to be set. Like that, you have to set the rules
for sure,
and the guardrails and the boundaries around what they can and can't do, because otherwise, left unchecked, they will turn it into another production environment that you then have to manage, backup, protect, all that stuff.
It just makes it that much more for the non, techie storage guy. This is a really easy process to follow.
Yeah,
and that ticket comes in, it's a right click, right? It's not dropping to a command line and remembering how to do a flex clone and all that stuff. It all just happens.
Love it.
Yeah. So I mentioned consistency groups. So where are we? So consistency group, first and foremost, was a block-based thing. It addressed the need. If I have an application that spans multiple volumes, so I have LUNs in multiple volumes, I want to take a known good recovery point of the application. So I want to make sure when I create a snapshot, that snapshot happens on all of those volumes at the exact same moment in time. And when I replicate that data, that known good point of the application is replicated as well. So when I bring that application up, it's all to the same moment.
Am I right in remembering that consistency groups, the genesis of them were around Microsoft products like Hyper-V and SQL and things like that?
Databases, right?
Databases,
right. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. There are other ones that are consistency sensitive, but databases are the big one. And you want to make sure that your database files are consistent with your log files, or consistent, it all has to tie to the same moment in time.
Yeah.
And that's where we first launched it. Where it's gone to now is it still delivers that, but now in System Manager, you also have your consistency group level performance numbers and capacity numbers. You also now have your ability to have individual snapshot schedules on the individual volumes. So think of them, yes, they fill that need for databases, but it's also now a way, if I have any application that spans multiple volumes, it's a great way to organize my data by application. Oh, the other thing I can do on consistency groups as well, I can tag them. We'll talk about tagging a little later on, but I can also apply tags like, what is the application? Who's the application owner, right? What should the protection policies be? And it's a great way of, rather than looking at things like volumes or LUNs, which is very storage centric, it's a way of organizing those into application-centric constructs and
Stacks.
managing things at the application level.
Yeah. And the beauty of the reason I love tags are agnostic to whether it's storage, compute, networking, whatever. You can tag everything, and the trick to doing this right is to setting the standard. Lock everybody in a room with a stack of pizzas and decide what your company, what tags your department is going to use, and don't use any other tags. Agree on them all, and then like everything gets tagged in a very standardized kind of way across the entire infrastructure stack, and then it becomes real easy to start managing, understanding who owns what. Like you said, protection policies begin to come into play there around. You can begin to build those into the ticketing and provisioning systems internally. So based on certain service levels that are set, you can automatically apply tags to those with that service level, which will define a protection. I love tags. I'm OCD about tags. Absolutely.
Well, this is good. So in 9.14 in System Manager, you can apply tags to volumes and clusters. And it's sort of almost unlimited how many you have in there. It's very expansive. But as you said, you can have like who's the app owner, what's the protection policy, what's the data state, like is it pre-prod or prod or development data, any number of things you can apply those tags. All is metadata that sits with the object, not inside the data at all. And it fixes the problem for automation around trying to do things out of volume name, right? We see some really creative volume names coming in. This can replace that. And now in 9.14, to be fair, in System Manager, all I can do is edit and manage. All of the operation is done at the API level. So, for scripting, you can then do things like, hey, give me the total capacity of all volumes that have the tag Oracle, right? And that would pull not only in one cluster, but maybe across all clusters. Or you can combine the tags to say, for all clusters that have the tag production, give me the capacity of all volumes that have the tag Oracle. And now you're automating. Now those could be ONTAP objects on-prem or in the cloud or both, right? And hey, for all ONTAP clusters that have the tag cloud, pull down this sort of information, right? It's sort of endless to your point, but man, it makes management so much easier.
Yeah, tags run amok is a disaster waiting to happen. And that's why I always say, like, do the upfront one-time effort of locking everybody in a room and everybody decide what tags they're going to use and stick to it. And do it by committee. So you include everybody, and anytime anybody wants to add or change a tag, do it by committee so everybody's on the same page. Because if people start tagging stuff with just useless names of things that nobody understands or isn't documented, document your tags. Then it's just going to be chaos and tags run amok. So
get those key pairs, right? Know what those key pairs should be. But
yes,
really powerful way of helping automation in the environment.
Yeah, cool. So System Manager's got it now in 9.14.
Yeah. So you can view and edit and manage them in System Manager now.
Oh, I can't wait.
That's all. Now looking ahead a little bit, obviously, what we want to be able to do is in System Manager start being able to like filter and sort and take actions based on tags. That's not there in 9.14. But all that can obviously be done through REST APIs, through the automation aspect.
Awesome. And I think a lot of people that would really, really take advantage of tags are probably not the ones managing day-to-day in the web GUI of System Manager. They're using internal provisioning systems that are deploying volumes via REST calls and things like that, or changing access.
Multiple clusters, multiple locations. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep. Hey, I'm totally off script here, but we're going to jump around as it's organic.
Okay. Yeah, do it.
Speaking of automation, for those people, a big update or big enhancement is support for OAuth 2.0. Now, I didn't know a whole lot about this, but I do know that anytime I've done automation or scripting before, I always felt super awkward about, in my PowerShell script having, login, username, password, like in plain text, right? I'm like, this doesn't feel good. So OAuth 2.0 is an open source automation authentication framework that supported a number of different automation platforms, in particular Ansible, right? One of the ones we use heavily in the ONTAP space. And what it does now in System Manager 9.14, you can create and manage and control, your authentication token. So I can say, hey, I want to create a new token. Here's the permissions I want it to have. Here's the expiry date, how long they can do that, and then generate that token and provide that for the automation platform, so that username and password is never stored in plain text. And at any point, you as the ONTAP administrator can revoke or change permission levels of those tokens. So way more secure level and a lot simpler management of permissions and authentication for automation frameworks.
Love that. Love that. This is something I didn't even know we were working on. This is fantastic.
Yeah. It's just going to make it easier to manage and never have that like password in plain text scenario, right? Having admin sitting around on that.
Password one. Not good. Back to data protection. Yes.
Here's an interesting one. Backup applications, right? Increasingly, backup applications want to use object store. And why wouldn't they, right? It's super easy to manage. Rather than them trying to manage a series of files or a file system, they just point towards an object store, create a new object, which is a backup point, and repeat. Increasingly, they want to, when the backup is done, lock that backup so that it can't be attacked by ransomware, right? And that's a big target. Is if you're gonna ransom a customer's environment, you want to get not just the data, we want to get the backups as well. So 9.14 introduces support for S3 object lock, and that's going to make C-series platforms and the FAS platforms really attractive as backup targets. Not only do they have the raw performance to hold up to that backup, which not many object platforms do, but now with this object lock, those backup apps can lock that data as soon as it's backed up and you're ready to go. Now, there's lots of other use cases for this, but that's the big one.
This introduces some overlap as well in a way. So how do we position this in a way besides Storage Grid and besides SnapLock? I see that there's a bit of a triangle happening there across all of those different things. Do me a favor, as someone who lives and breathes this day to day, how do you sort of align those three different moving pieces?
So you can think about this sort of as SnapLock adjacent, like it uses some SnapLock capabilities under the covers. Not to the full degree that SnapLock goes all the way down to the drive level. So it's a lot more like tamper-proof snapshots, but it uses some SnapLock technology. So it's complementary there. And yes, this is one more API that we have, but it's still, if you were to do that kind of the Venn diagram of here's all S3 APIs and here's Storage Grid APIs, ONTAP is still a really small portion of that, right? We're still really primitive from the full S3 API set, and that's okay. That's not our intent. Like ONTAP, that's a real sweet spot that we're really, really fast object storage, but we're pretty simple. Storage Grid is much more sophisticated for lifecycle management, location aware policies, many more of the more rich S3 APIs. So if you're kind of a native object application, you're probably wanting Storage Grid. If you're just kind of you want some basic S3, but you need high performance S3, that's where ONTAP actually shines pretty well. And ONTAP also, obviously, you can carve off, you need 100 gigs or 300 gigs or, a small portion. That's really hard to do in Storage Grid. It's a big platform. ONTAP is great for just being able to carve off a little piece of object as well. Nice.
Okay. So you're not ready to go full bore into like hosting your own object store, but you still need a little bit of object storage.
Yeah. If you just need kind of basic, puts and gets and now locks, absolutely. This is, ONTAP it has versioning and, has some basic lifecycle management. So ONTAP still kind of your bare bones as opposed to something that's much more feature rich like Storage Grid.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, let's hop over. Similar data protection adjacent is high availability. So when I say high availability, when we're just talking about object, we now support ONTAP S3 on Metro Cluster. So now not only can my object be high performance, it's also highly available. Now again, comparing the storage grid has awareness of up to 16 sites, where I can have the same object be available at 16 different locations. That's not this, right? This is, hey, I've got some object storage that my application depends on. It has to be there. With Metro Cluster, I can now have it synchronously replicated between two sites with full site resiliency. So this is more for that mission critical object, which a few years ago you'd be like, mission critical object, like that's not a thing. But it is becoming a thing as more and more
source code repositories for apps that are getting built. Like absolutely, it's mission critical.
Yeah. So awesome. We can now deliver that with Metro Cluster.
Beautiful. That's fantastic. So it says here ONTAP 9.14.1 added support for S3 data on non-mirrored aggregates. So the enhancement is that we're now allowing in Metro Cluster, but now in 9.14 we are the enhancement is that we are doing it mirrored.
Put it on the mirror, so it's mirrored between the sites. Exactly.
Got it.
Yeah,
nice.
Having it, 9.13 having it on a non-mirrored aggregate was like, well, it's sort of supported, but not real. It's not that useful. It doesn't deliver the need, which is that high availability on two sites. Which is
it's great that the box kind of got checked, but it didn't really get all the way checked. It was sort of just where my head goes with this, Keith, just as some color commentary, is whenever I hear Metro Cluster, my head immediately goes to large campus networks, university campuses, federal government campuses, whatever it might be. There's a lot of Metro Cluster deployments in those kinds of places where there's close proximity buildings, less than a mile away from each other, and you've got high enough bandwidth to be able to do things like that. What is a lot of stuff that's happening on universities? Research. There's a lot of research that happens, and what do they need? A ton of data. And they're doing a ton of these sort of AI models, and especially specifically, they're doing a lot of machine learning models, genome sequencing, things like that. A lot of that stuff gets stored in object storage as just large, massive sets of data. And I absolutely see the two of these kind of combining into a wonderful marriage here of being able to take Metro Cluster on large campus networks and being able to span those data sets across Metro Cluster pairs. Mwah! Beautiful.
Needs to be high performance, needs to be highly available. That fits the bill. Exactly.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let me hop over to a couple of the security things. We already talked about the OAuth. Another thing we did in here, when you do things like alerts, what you want to do is get the alert level right, that you don't want too many alerts, you don't want too few, right? Too many alerts becomes noise and you ignore it. And so one of the things we added in to 9.14.1 is some basic event severity settings. So you can, for autonomous ransomware protection, now control when it detects certain things, how severe should that be? In particular, things like a ransomware attack pattern. Well, that's pretty severe. That should always be an alert, right? We're detecting actual ransomware there. But there's other things that ARP detects on, like new file extensions. If I created a new file with an extension you've never seen before, and one of them pop up, is that something you're worried about? No, probably not. If I suddenly have
possibly, but not necessarily,
or 1,000 of these files within a window, that's maybe a bit more worrisome, right?
Yeah.
So now we can change these thresholds to say, hey, if I'm triggering on things like new extensions, how severe should that be? Should I ring the alarm, or should I just maybe log it so I know when that occurred? So some tunability in the alerts to make it a little more timely, right? To make sure you're not getting too much noise coming off the system.
Got it. I like that. I still want the audit logs, though. We're keeping those around, right?
Absolutely.
We're just not like poking you every time a thing comes in.
Do you want to be audit log as a notification? Do you want to be audit log as an alert? Or do you want to be audit log and alert and take a snapshot? Right. And that is that sort of your three levels of, how severe should this be, as well as being able to tune like how many new extensions and how many hours.
I did have a question about this that came up at Insight, and I honestly didn't know the answer. How does the blacklist of extensions get updated in ARP? And is that dependent on ONTAP release, or is that something that is kind of like your Windows Defender on your desktop getting constantly iterated on?
Right now it's by ONTAP release. Users can edit them themselves if you want to add into it. Um, truth be told, that shouldn't count as your line of defense. Like we're not counting in those extensions really to protect the data. It's sort of a, hey, that's a really easy way of blocking out own ransomware. But if guys are using known extensions, they're not that serious hackers anyway, right? They're using some recycled code. They're sort of the like Nigerian prince emails.
The script kiddies.
Good to turn it on because it's going to filter out the easy ones. But you really, the true ARP doesn't count on just the extensions. It looks at how the files are actually changing as well. But yeah, that blacklist is done when we do ONTAP upgrades.
Okay.
We are looking at making that modular, something we can do outside of the normal release cycle. But right now it's during ONTAP upgrades, which is another reason it's important to stay as current as you're comfortable with on the ONTAP releases.
Data center dude's going to finger wag at you a little bit.
We had that whole discussion last year on that, which was
we
super
did. Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited. I remember when I turned ARP on, I let it run for 30 days. On my C250 I've got here, I let it run for 30 days, and it was interesting to see what was happening behind the scenes. I'm anxious to get on the RC later this week when that's available and just kind of see what happens that might be different. I can tell you, as just a piece of feedback, I had more than one conversation about the ability to update those blacklists on a sort of almost as if you're subscribed to some of the, Cisco has the special TAC one for those sorts of things. Like any sort of, I understand that it's the kind of the last line of defense in a true data center stack. Like you're going to have your front end with intrusion protection and all of that stuff. But if people have gotten all the way down to your storage system and have started somehow, or a server that has a mount point that started writing files to your storage, your volumes, in however they're doing that, then yeah, it kind of is the last line of defense to be able to do that. So I would definitely love to see us have a way where we can update those lists in a more modern
and
way.
Really, we talked about it a couple of years ago, this idea of a autonomous ONTAP, right? About having it pull down its own updates. That would be one of those areas where that's a pretty harmless thing to update.
Yeah.
But we could have it automatically refresh those, or as part of like when you're doing firmware, right? Bringing those new extensions down. Something we're still working at, because right now it is still very monolithic, right? We don't have a way of doing those individual updates, but something we're looking at for sure.
Good to hear. Thank you.
Rounding out the security, a few minor ones. By 9 is the again open source code we use for our on-box DNS. To be clear, we had patched it and maintained it, but because we were using an older version of it, ONTAP was flagging in some security audits, and that's never good. We want to make sure it sails to those security scans. So in 9.14, we do update the version of by 9 we're using, which not only make sure we'll pass those security audits, but makes it easier for us to upgrade in the future as well.
Update your ONTAP.
Yep, absolutely. Yep, be secure. MFA, Cisco Duo, we added that in 9.12 for System Manager, but now it's also for the SSH connection. And then finally, encryption. So this is mostly for service providers where you have the scenario of, I've got multiple tenants, the old Coke, Pepsi on the same ONTAP system. They each want to provide their own encryption key so that my data is encrypted separately from somebody else's. Yeah. Now, when we do that at a SVM level, all volumes, including the root volumes, are encrypted. So there's never any client data in the root volumes, but those were always sort of outside the realm of volume level encryption. Now even the root volumes are encrypted with the external key. So everything for that tenant is encrypted by the exact same key.
Fantastic.
Security. Can't be too safe.
No, never. And I love that every single release we're constantly finding new things, even on our own, that we can do better. I think that's one of the things that I've always loved about ONTAP is that it somehow, 30 years later, somehow it's still continuing to get better and better and better and better, and leaner and meaner and faster and stronger and more secure. Like somehow it just can, there's no end in sight as far as things we can continue to improve on it. and it still keeps being as performant, as powerful, as robust as it always was. That's always been one of my favorite things about NetApp.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that. I say when we do ONTAP versions, you know, part of the release testing, as you're coming up to release can, what we're doing right now, as you approach, a couple things are always checked. One is performance, right? Our objective is every version of ONTAP is more performant than the previous. Now, and we've almost always delivered that, which is crazy because you go, hey, we're adding in 88 new features and we're making it faster, right? And then every version continues to be faster. So you get a performance bump typically every time you upgrade. Storage efficiency is the other one. We'll talk about storage efficiency very shortly. We're making every version of ONTAP more storage efficient. So it to your point, it is pretty crazy that you're able to do both those things and add features continuously, and there doesn't seem to be any end in sight for doing that. Upgrade your ONTAP; it's only going to make it faster. So, I think it's been 9.8, so it's been 5 years, 6 years around fabric pools, and hopefully everybody's really aware of fabric pools. But when we designed fabric pool, it was like we wanted to do data placement done right. I kind of say it had to be automatic, it had to be super easy to manage. We saw other tiering solutions that were really complex. They were really messy with redirects, file stubs, and it was just a disaster. So Fabric Pool had to be super easy to manage, easy to maintain. Basically, the problem statement was 5 years ago, Flash was even more expensive. Ultimately, when you have an all-Flash system, you're going to end up with cold data, a lot of cold data, and that's not optimal. So let's find a way of packaging that cold data up and move it to a less expensive location, right? Something that's more aligned for cold data. And we refer to it as a cloud tier, but that can be any type of object storage out there, on-prem or in the cloud. And in those 5 years, Fabric Pool's tiered over an exabyte of data.
Wow.
So a ton.
There's a lot of cold data sitting out there.
Well, yes. I met with a customer in Insight who said, hey, we designed for Fabric Pool. We went in and we made the estimation that 70% of our data was cold. 30% of our data would be cold, 70% hot. And then right away I'm like, oh no, that's not going to be good. And he goes, yeah, we ran out of space on our cloud tier. And I'm like, well, the good news is that's the cheaper tier, right? The bad news is you budgeted it. But I could have told you there's no way that 70% of your data is hot, right? It's almost always in that 80-20 scenario, right?
Yeah. 20%
of the data is hot, 80% of all data ends up cold.
Is there something in ONTAP where before you even set up a cloud tier, where you can sort of get an idea of hot versus cold data? Is there analysis that's done that you can sort of visualize maybe before you make a capital expense purchase like that is going to be with you for the next few years and you don't get it wrong?
Yeah, there is. If the file share is on ONTAP, we do have a tool that will go into that and monitor the blocks and give you that temperature. But it uses the default, which is 30 days. So depending on what you do for your policy, you could adjust that kind of one way or the other, right? Depending on how aggressive you want to be with that tiering policy.
Gotcha.
Still, it's one of those things you can do it. 80-20 is still a pretty safe. They always sort of end up somewhere in that sort of range where most of that data is cold.
Yeah.
Now,
interesting.
Normal operation of Fabric Pool is background, right? It runs opportunistically in the background. When we have spare cycles, we go look for cold data, package that up, send it to the cloud tier. But what if I start to run out of space on my primary tier? And so in 9.14, if I'm starting to run out of space on my hot tier, we will proactively bump up the priority of that to go, whoa, we're getting low on space. We don't want an out of space condition. Let's be more aggressive about trying to find some cold data and get that off of there and avoid that space condition.
So are you saying that it'll start looking at It'll start looking at more aggressively at maybe some warmer than cold
It won't
stuff
go
and
out of the
start packaging
policy.
that. Not
No, it won't
necessarily
go out of the
hot.
policy, but rather than just being opportunistic, it'll become a primary process, and we'll
Got
start
it. Okay.
to find any cold data that is there to be found.
Okay. Interesting. I wonder if there would be a use case for a tunable that would maybe start breaking the thresholds of the policy a little bit in that scenario where you're like 95% at capacity and you're like, oh crap, I'm going to run out of usable space. Maybe dial up the policy to not necessarily need 30 days, but maybe 15 days instead. And then it can all sort of settle back down once you've added some additional capacity down the road. You can dial that back. I don't know.
Before we went
Interesting
live,
scenario.
you and I were talking about AI. That sounds like a great use of AI of going, hey, you're running out of space, but if you changed your policy like this, we could get you this much more. You're right. It'd be a prime use case.
Yeah.
The other thing we added in 9.14 is I tell customers about Fabric Pool and how it works. Oh man, I have this huge data set on competitor or on Windows file servers, whatever. I know my data's cold. I want to move it to Fabric Pool, but do I have to land it somewhere hot first? And the answer is yeah. You have to land it on the hot tier and then wait for Fabric Pool. Well, 9.14 changes that. So now I can put it in cloud write mode, which means that when I do the data migration, and for 9.14 it's NFS only, all data writes go directly to the cloud tier. All I land on the hot tier is the metadata. So the file system and the metadata information lands there, but all the data blocks go directly. So I don't need any space to do that migration. And then once the migration is done, then things will balance out into that 80-20 scenario or 90-10
Gotcha.
or 70-30.
That was going to be my question, was like, how long will it take for things to settle down once that migration's done? Got it.
Yeah, as soon as the migration's done, from that moment on, all writes will go to the hot tier, and then reads will get tiered back up. So it'll stabilize itself shortly after, but immediately once the migration's done, all writes will happen to the hot tier.
How are you seeing people architect these kinds of layouts from a hardware perspective? Are you seeing people leverage sort of older FASs and repurposing them as a cloud tier? Are you seeing QLC sort of, the C-series stuff start to bump those out? Because I'm seeing people, I heard it a lot at Insight, that people are rethinking 3.5-inch mechanical in lieu of QLC because of surely because of density. It's a conversation I had at least 10 times at Insight. And I'm thinking about this in a Fabric Pool context now that we're talking about it, and yeah, it makes a lot of sense if you've got an AFF and then a C-series, an A-series and a C-series clustered together, and you're doing a Fabric Pool configuration. Like, wow, that starts to make a lot of sense because of the amount of disk density you're going to get and effective capacity you're going to get out of a simple C250. You're going to get nearly 300 terabytes of usable space. That's a ton.
I think the key thing you said, though, is what you're indicating is how do I architect that on-prem? So when we first designed Fabric Pool, our thought was really, well, I'd send all that cold data to the cloud. That's like, send that to the cloud, not worry about it, which does work well. But I think we were unprepared for how many customers wanted to keep everything on-prem. It's more predictable. It's you can do the cost calculations. Latency is less. So when we first designed Fabric Pool, we wanted to keep costs down, right? And sending data to the cloud cheap, pulling data back from the cloud, not so much so. So we made sure that if you wanted a 4K block back from the cold tier, even though we were sending a 4 meg object, we would pull back just the 4K block. So we were super lean on what we would fetch back. But on-prem, to your point, if I'm doing this all on-prem, I don't really have the idea of egress costs.
Yeah.
And so if I want a 4K block out of a file, there's a good chance I'm going to want the rest of that file. So why not pull back the whole file? If I wrote a bunch of files out together and I want one file, why not pull the other files back? Because there's a good chance I'm going to want those. And so in 9.14, we have an on-prem mode or a locality mode that will use head. What's old is new again, right? We're using our old FAS disk read ahead caching to predict what blocks we should bring back and prefetch it. And it has a huge impact on performance. By the way, in the cloud, you can use this in the cloud as well. If I'm using CVO and I'm tiering to that cloud provider's object store, again, there'll be no egress costs because it's inside the same cloud. So I can do the same optimization right in there.
Very cool. I'm looking at how I would deal with this now. And yeah, I would certainly look at repurposing older systems, but I would take a very hard look at my rack density and evaluate whether that amount of RUs is going to plus or minus versus the amount of density I can cram into a 2 or 3U system of QLC at a nearly similar price point when you factor all the things in.
It'll be close. So, the nearline SAS, we just released the 20 terabyte nearline SAS. That's still pretty hard to compete from a dollar per gig standpoint, even for QLC.
Yeah.
But you're right. You're comparing 16 terabyte QLC and soon to be bigger. It will get to the point where you're absolutely right. The QLC will be really attractive.
Consumer market's already doing 60 terabyte flash drives. So it's around the corner at some point.
It is. Your idea, can I tier from A to C? Absolutely. Yeah. Right? Super high performance, all flash. That's where your creme de la creme. But you could go today, like you said, if I have a FAS there, certainly going from an A series to a FAS, and then at any time you can change where you're tiering. You can non-destructively move that to your C series.
Gotcha.
So that's a big one.
So lots of exciting things happening around Fabric Pool coming in 9.14. That's exciting because I feel like because of the people moving up to Flash, and we've seen that really hockey stick in the last few years.
Yep.
I feel like things like Fabric Pool might have been left behind a little bit because they don't really need them as much anymore. I'm saying now with the workloads that are coming in the next, I guess, hear me when I say what I'm about to say. In the next 5 years, the types of workloads that you're going to be dealing with are not going to be VMs running web apps that much anymore. They're going to be extremely data-dense, CPU and GPU intensive workloads. You are going to be dealing with a lot of very hot horsepower being driven to your storage systems. So prepare for that. I see a world where Fabric Pool is going to be second nature, almost a default position for a lot of our customers out there over the course of the next 3 to 5 years. It's absolutely massive what you can squeeze out of a system now.
I tell you, I have yet to really find an unhappy Fabric Pool customer. It just works, right? It's just one of those things that just does its job. I'll tell you who's really excited about this feature, though. Our media and gaming friends. So you imagine a big texture map or a big image file, right? It gets created, used for a while. You want that hot, and then ultimately it gets kind of left behind. And I want to move that off the hot tier to cold because it's not being used. But once a developer grabs a bit of that file, there's a good chance he's going to want the rest of that file. And so that's when suddenly being able to touch a little bit of that file and the whole thing comes back into the hot tier, that's where it's a real big opportunity to have a small set of high performance data and then a huge pool of slightly cooler storage for the rest of all your big file images.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's going to be big.
Hey,
I want to do a quick time check here. We're about 5 minutes till the top of the hour. I'm not saying you have to finish up in the next 5 minutes, but just to get a heads up. I know we can get chatty, me and you.
I know, and I want to make sure I get the last one in because it was a bit of a teaser, and I don't know how much longer my voice is going to last if you've heard that as well. So let's go while I still have some juice. Let's talk about SnapMirror ActiveSync. This was the other big announcement at Insight. So first off, it's a name change, right? And I'm not usually a big one around name changes, but I like this one. So SnapMirror Business Continuity is going to become SnapMirror ActiveSync.
Okay.
And I kind of like that because business continuity sort of described the outcome, but not really what it did. And so now tying that into the SnapMirror family, within SnapMirror, you're going to have these three modes. Asynchronous, right? Pretty obvious what that is. A to B on a schedule. SnapMirror synchronous, A to B constantly. And then active sync, which is A to B, but active. And let me kind of explain what we kind of mean by active. So business continuity today, we replicate a LUN from one site to another site. That's the LUN primary, your LP there, to over to LS. LP is read-writable. LS is read-only. And if you had a host that spanned those two sites, all your paths would be active to both clusters, but only one path is active optimized. That's the primary LUN. And so although you could send I/O to the secondary, you'd have to proxy that back, which is not ideal. You're going across that wire twice. But then we do have a mediator that makes sure everything stays online, and it works really well for what it is. But let me kind of explain what we're doing with this, which is with SnapMirror Active Sync, that link can become bidirectional. So we're replicating synchronously both directions. So the idea of a primary LUN and a secondary LUN kind of goes away. It's just a LUN. And that same LUN is available on both clusters simultaneously. So if I do have a host that's attached to both sites, I'll have active optimized paths to both locations.
So how does this affect things like being able to load balance SVMs and things like that?
Bingo.
Does that come into play?
So Nick, you and I are VMware guys. This is the first place we're looking at this, which is if I wanted to use VMware Metro Storage Cluster, which is I want to take a group of vSphere hosts, put them on two sites, and then bind them together into an HA cluster, right? So now if I just have VMware HA, that if I have a host fail, those VMs pop up somewhere else. But probably more importantly, I can do disaster avoidance, right? So disaster recovery is one thing, right? Everything goes down, it pops up somewhere else. But if I know about something coming up, I know there's a power event happening in my data center, or there's a hurricane coming to one city, or I have to work on the cooling systems of my data center, I can now evacuate a data center. And I can vMotion those VMs from one site to another site completely non-disruptively. And I do that by creating a VMFS data store. And I make sure that my, at least first iteration, my hosts have attachment to both ONTAP clusters. And then under the covers, I can now do SnapMirror Active Sync and have that LUN presented up. But notice where the green lines are. So if I have a VM running on site A, its I/O goes to the ONTAP cluster at site A. It's all local. And then when I move the VM over to site B, that I/O stays local to site B. I never have to run, or should never have to run cross-site. And that's what we're doing in Tech Preview 9.14, but we're looking to support non-uniform access as well, which is this, which is sort of mind-blowing, which is now where my vSphere hosts maybe only have fiber channel connection to my ONTAP cluster on the local site. And the only thing that binds the site together is IP, so that across that IP, my ONTAP clusters replicate and my layer 2 network spans. And so this, I think, will be a really powerful capability for clusters or customers that can have that span layer 2 across two locations.
Had a question come in that's pretty timely.
Sure.
Does SMAS work with NVMe over Fabric namespaces?
It will, yes. So with the Tech Preview, we're doing it on Fiber Channel. But for the GA, which we're planning for a future release of ONTAP, it will be for any block protocol. So NVMe over Fabric, NVMe TCP.
Nice. Thank you for the question, OG. That was a good one.
Yep.
So am I seeing this? Are we effectively doing MPHA at the SVM level now across? Am I interpreting this the right way? We're now sort of, you don't really have to move your SVMs anymore?
Well, this is happening at a per LUN level. So you actually would still, in this case, still have two separate SVMs. But the concept of an SVM in LUN land is sort of meh, right? It's more important on your unstructured data.
I got you. So you've got the same LUN on each end connected to their own sort of respective SVM, and then the LUNs are snap mirroring.
Bingo. Yep.
Got it. Okay.
Yep. The big thing here is that you can both sites are read writable, and you're only traversing that cross once, right? You write locally, you sync it across the wire, and then you ACK it back to the client. and that happens regardless of which side the I/O comes in. So you can load balance those VMs, and you can move VMs from side to side and not worry about cross-site pathing or having the I/O cross the site and cross back. It all stays local. So really powerful capability. We're starting with the VMware one, but obviously for things like databases, this is super powerful as well.
One other question come back in from Glendon here. Will SMAS work with SVMDR?
No, sort of different use cases. Or unless you're saying, hey, can I move that to a third site? There will be a scenario of, hey, I can have this across 2 sites and then still have a asynchronous replication to a third site for archiving or maybe a geographical protection. We will be doing that, but again, SVMDR typically is used for unstructured data rather than block based, and so yes, you will have support third sites, not necessarily with SVMDR though, because that's more of an unstructured concept.
So he suggested SVM SMAS as a new.
I see.
That's an interesting idea, Glendon.
Yeah. Let me phrase that a different way. So what you're asking is, hey, can I do this with unstructured data? And the answer is not yet. This is designed. We really want to finish the the SnapMirror business continuity journey, or synchronous granular replication on block world. And now we can. Well, once we're done this, I should get too far ahead of myself. Then we can turn our eye on how we would do that for NAS data or unstructured data. Might be at the SVM level, might be smaller than that, might be at the directory or volume, right? So there's different ways we could approach that, but that's not there yet. That's a future direction. This is today block based.
Gotcha. Cool. Thank you, Keith. And
Great
thanks for the questions, Glendon and OG. All right. Anything else to cover here with SMAS?
I think that's it.
I think you can take the NDA off your slide now too, right?
That's where I had the most questions.
Well, I think you can take the NDA off your slide now because we announced it, right?
Yes, I can. It's, things to do once you're back from Insight. Yes. Should highlight it. It is in tech preview in 9.14 only. But we are still looking for customers that want to test it. So there's an NG here if you want to do a screenshot. Shoot an email up to that NG if you have an environment that might support this. If you're maybe an SMBC customer today and want to test this with VMware, love to have more test customers.
Definitely. We'll post that in Discord as well for you guys as a follow up, just in case you guys want to get a hold of Keith or the rest of the team to be able to take care of that.
So that was the bulk of it. Those are the key things we did. Obviously, we didn't do. I think we did 13 of the 88. There'll be more. Once the code drops here, later this week. Check the release notes. You'll see maybe a few more little nuggets in there. But those are the heavy hitters for the release for sure.
Nice. So Bergeon here put in, our consistency groups also supported with Sync Active-Active?
Absolutely, of course.
Yep. Nice. I did have one little fun announcement to drop on you here that you may or may not know happened this week to kind of round out the show here. And I wanted to kind of surprise you and everybody else. We now have the version 1.0 of the ONTAP Terraform provider is now available.
Ooh.
And I'm going to we're going to do an announcement in Discord later this afternoon after the show here. And I'll have links to all of the repositories and where you can download the provider and all of that stuff. But yes, finally, we have an ONTAP Terraform provider. It is version 1.0. It is not completely feature full of everything that I'm aware of, but big shout out to Sushma and Chris Archibald and the rest of the team that worked on getting this done. It has been an effort. But definitely check out if you're a Terraform user, definitely check that out. You can do all kinds of fun stuff. And there's all kinds of other little fun side projects that are being worked on that I can't talk to you about yet. We're going to keep you guys updated.
Now that we have first-party service for all three of the hyperscalers, that's huge, right? Having Terraform now to complement that, massive.
Yeah. So I wanted to sneak that one in here at the end as a little Easter egg, little button for you guys to round out the ONTAP 9.14 because they kind of go hand in hand. A lot of the stuff that we're working on now has to do with the first-party storage in the cloud providers that is driven all by ONTAP under the covers, and how it complements some of the stuff that we're doing with ONTAP on-prem, whether you're using System Manager, BlueXP, APIs, and Ansible, any of that kind of stuff. It all starts to come together and give you a way to sort of do things in a more desired state kind of configuration if you want to do standardize the way you do certain things with using Terraform. So very excited about that. I know the team is super excited to very excited to get that out. Finally, it's something that they've really been grinding on all year, frankly. I've been checking in with Archibald throughout the year this year, and it's like, not yet, not yet, not yet. We wanted to have it out before Insight, but we had to go through some security and, good old legal challenges, those sorts of things. But we got it out there. And big announcement.
Congratulations to the team. That's awesome.
Yeah. Sushma, Chris Archibald, I don't know everybody's name that's on the team. I apologize, but thank you. Customers are going to love that. They've been asking for it. You know this stuff, but very excited to have it out there for you guys, and we'll get that posted up in Discord. Actually, Archibald already posted it in the Terraform channel if you haven't seen it yet. So definitely go check that out.
Teaser then Nick is
okay.
In 2024.
Oh,
or so in 2023 we did ONTAP 1, we did the C series, we did the new ASA, we did ASA C series, as well as 9.13 and ONTAP 9.14. Big year. I was busy. I
kind of count. It wasn't the A900 in there as well at the end of 22. No, that was 21. Never mind.
Yeah.
That was 2021. Never mind.
2024 is going to put it to shame.
Oh, so, good heavens!
We'll see each other a lot, but it's sort of terrifying that there's going to be that many more launches and announcements and changes. It's going to be pretty wild.
Our good friend and fellow OG veteran of NetApp, Mr. Chris Luth, who has been on the show as well, did put a little bit of a whisper in my ear at Insight about what's coming.
Yep.
Y'all ain't ready.
Yeah, it's going to be pretty wild.
Y'all ain't ready.
It's going to be pretty wild.
Yeah. Well, Keith, as always, man, thank you so much, one, for being such an active part of the community and going on these crazy adventures with me and doing these fun experiments that I like to do. Thank you for being active and always there to answer questions in Discord for our customers and users and all of that stuff. Guys, please join if you're not in there yet. It's the best place to get access directly to people like Keith, some of our executive support personnel, and all of our experts at NetApp. That is the place. That's what it's for. We have support forums, and we're going to be doing discussion channels, community, all of that stuff. We're going to be doing a lot more over the course of the next year with Discord. And Keith is one of our senior product managers that are in there for ONTAP to talk all things ONTAP with you and help answer any questions that you might have. If you have questions about this show, you can hit up the on-air chat channel, and Keith will respond in there for that stuff. But yeah, Keith, once again, thank you so much for being a part of the show.
Sorry for subjecting everybody to my horrible post-Vegas voice.
Yeah, it's something that we're still... guys, KubeCon's going on right now in Chicago. We got reInvent in a couple of weeks right after Thanksgiving. Gartner's having their big annual event, I believe, in the symposium in December. And I think that's it for the year. And then we get to have Christmas, and then we're back to all new stuff all over again. It's Here we go. Let's go. Well, thank you so much, Keith. I got a few closing comments just to remind the people of, but as always, thanks for being on the show. We appreciate it, and we'll have you back for maybe the launch.
Sounds good.
Goes GA.
You bet.
All right, man. Take care. Well, guys, there you have it, Mr. Keith Aasen. For those of you watching over on Twitch, YouTube, Discord, LinkedIn, I see all of you over there as well. Thank you for joining in the show today. Big shout out to Mr. Keith Aasen for joining us once again here on the show. I feel like Keith and I could talk for 2 or 3 hours about all the enhancements going on. OG, thank you for the reminder. Yes, VMworld Barcelona also happening this week in Barcelona. So I definitely want to shout out to everybody that's out in the field doing all of these shows and representing NetApp. I know Spot's doing a big representation at KubeCon right now in Chicago, and we've got reInvent going on right here in Vegas in a couple of weeks. So lots of stuff happening around the world. Love all of these kind of chats that we have with you guys. There's going to be much, much more as we ramp this up. All of the information you'll be able to find in Discord. Make sure you subscribe to the YouTube channel here. This is set up as a podcast as well, so I believe you can add it to your feeds. I'm not sure how YouTube podcasts really work at the end of the day, but we'll get all of that sorted out in the coming days and months. But be sure you subscribed to the YouTube channel here. Follow us on Twitch. Come join us in Discord. And make sure you follow NetApp on LinkedIn for any and all updates that you need for all things NetApp. But until next time, take care.